Well, welcome everyone, and thank you for coming to our Thursday evening keynote address. Before we get started, there's just a few reminders. Don't forget to get involved in the TLD Goose Chase. It's a fun way to engage and extend your learning at TLD, and you have until the end of tomorrow to win one of our prizes. So good luck with that. And remember that in addition to the sessions on the agenda, we have a lot of resource posters from the TPS partners across the country. And those can be accessed under the poster link under the agenda section. So be sure to check out all the resources that go along with the sessions. And as a reminder, we're going to send out contact hour forms and a survey at the end of the week. And be sure to answer the for this presentation for your classroom, because we certainly want to know about that. And the last thing, please remember to utilize the question and answer and chat option in Whova. Our speaker tonight, Leanne Potter, assures me that she will ask you to participate. So you won't be hanging in the background. So let me introduce Leanne. So Leanne is the Director of Professional Learning and Outreach Initiatives at the Library of Congress, where she leads a very talented team, I can attest to, that are committed to developing educational programs and materials based on primary sources. Before Leanne came to the library in 2013, she created and directed education and volunteer programs at the National Archives for 16 years. And prior to that, she was at the Smithsonian on a project to build museum-school partnerships. And before that, she was a high school social studies teacher, maybe her most important job. She has conducted hundreds of presentations and is the author of numerous articles promoting teaching with primary sources. And with that, Leanne, I'll let you take it over.
Great. Thanks so much, Peggy. And really thanks everybody. I know it's a Thursday evening and it's been a busy day and it's been sort of an emotional day too. So I appreciate all of you being here, and I hope that our time together is time well spent. And like Peggy said, I really do appreciate it when folks participate. It's particularly important in the virtual space to know that, the speaker isn't talking to themselves. So I'm going to give you ample opportunity to participate, and I really hope that you will. Before we really get started, I want to thank our colleagues at Metro State in Denver for hosting the Teacher Librarian Days. I've had the good fortune of being there in person in past years, and I started my visit with Peggy tonight by saying, hey, usually when you guys do this, it's snowing in Denver. And in fact, it is snowing in Denver. So it's probably just as well that we are all virtual tonight. I hope everybody is cozy and warm and ready to have a fun conversation about Oasis. So when I told those colleagues at Metro State what I intended to talk about tonight, they asked me to actually put it in writing. And the description that I gave them is the description that you all have seen. And that is that images of, references to, and speculation about Oasis are found throughout the collections of the Library of Congress. There are also primary sources in a variety of media related to reimagining, reinvigorating, and re-energizing. In this keynote address, I intend to share select examples of these materials and stretch our thinking about creating a learning oasis. So with that, we're going to start stretching. We're going to play a little word association game, and this is where you have to participate. So I know that you're there, and you can do it, if you're eating your dinner between bites, it's all good. When I say Oasis, what comes to your mind? Can you just sort of start filling it away in the chat there? What comes to your mind when I say the word Oasis? Palm trees. Yeah, palm trees. Good answer. What else? Relaxation. Okay. Sand. Beach. Okay, we're not talking tropical islands. You're thinking like Gilligan's Island, I think. Okay, palm trees and water, peaceful, good, calm. Anything else? A place with everything I need. Nice. Heat, water, an escape environment. Okay, Tintin. This is good. All right. Okay, we're going to keep going sort of in that vein because I've got another question, and that is, when, or rather if you were to go to an oasis, and you've already started sort of answering this, what would you expect to receive while you're there? How might you benefit? And how might you be treated? What would you expect to receive? How might you benefit? And how would you be treated in this oasis? Full access to resources, safety from the elements. I love that. Shade, water, rest. You'd be welcomed. Good. Awesome. Yeah. So your needs are being fulfilled. That's great. Okay. Time to think. And treated special. I love it. Great. Okay. Wonderful, refreshing spot. Everything I'm looking for. Man, this is great. I want to go where you guys are going. This Oasis idea sounds like a good one. All right. So sort of building on what you just shared, thanks to Merriam-Webster, we do have a real definition. An oasis being a fertile or a green area in an arid region, such as a desert or Colorado, maybe, or something that provides refuge, relief, or a pleasant contrast. I like that description. All right. And next, imagine a learning oasis. Notice that I've sort of I've put learning in italics. So what might make a learning oasis different from a physical oasis? Or maybe a learning oasis is a physical oasis, but so what's it like? Is it a place where you get everything you're looking for? You would grow and expand your being. You would be treated with kindness. Equitable access to resources, nice. Differentiated to all learners. So we're speaking to that. How would you be treated? I love it. Everything you need. Nice. Learning oasis equals library. Very nice. Pleasant contrast, understanding perspectives, free to pursue what I'm interested in. I love it. Speaking to your curiosity, a different environment, everyone involved, accepted. You guys are good. Materials are provided, teamwork exists. Yeah, this sounds pretty terrific, doesn't it? Time to pursue at my leisure. Full of surprises. Excellent. All right, so I did this exercise too, by the way. I never ask an audience to do something I'm not also willing to do. So I've been imagining a learning oasis ever since the Metro State team asked me to do this talk. And what I decided is that a learning oasis in my mind is very much along the lines of what you all just said. I'm thinking of a learning oasis as a place or as an experience where curiosity is fed. So I guess I am sort of thinking about those, needs being fulfilled, where my curiosity is fed, where my intellect is stimulated, and where I feel connected, either to ideas or to other people. So that's sort of that's what I'm imagining when I imagine a learning oasis. And I love that so much of what you all have contributed to the chat sort of reflects that as well. I like that we all have these, this need for feeding our curiosity. So that's what we're going to do tonight. I'm going to feed your curiosity a little bit, I hope. And let's do that. Let me get started. So this is where I started. I started, as most of you do when you're doing a little research on the library's website. I did a very simple search of loc.gov on the term oasis. and you can't do it right now, so don't cheat, just for fun. How many results do you think you get if you do a search on the term Oasis on the library's website? Go ahead, throw some guesses out there. This is where I can tell if you, Patricia says 180,000. That's pretty good. Sherry, yeah, I love this. It's thousands. Yeah, see, Kyle, I'm with you. I kind of think that if anybody ever asks you a question of how many things are, if this in the library, if your answer is thousands, you're generally pretty safe. Because in fact, if you do a search on the term Oasis, the answer is, well, if you're looking at all items, 16,745. And if you're looking just for the objects that are available online, you get 15,200. But you guys know as well as I know that that's only if the term Oasis happens to be on the bibliographic record. And that means that Oasis is probably in a lot more places within the library's collections than just those thousands. But that said, those thousands do give us a really nice point of entry. And I tend to lean towards visual images when I'm first getting started, just like I did with the question I asked you about, when I say the word Oasis, what first comes to mind? Usually the answers end up being, physical spaces. And so that's where I started. I started with some images. So I started in those few hundred images of oases. And one of the images that I found was this one. And for me, it sort of fit the image I had in my head of an oasis. It had palm trees, it had sand, it had camels. But there were a couple of things about this image that I didn't assume would be, in my first oasis picture. I didn't, in my mind, I didn't have a pyramid there, but of course I should have, because if I'd been thinking about Egypt, maybe I would have seen it. I also didn't have images of people climbing the palm trees, but again, maybe I should have, because I guess, you see it on Survivor, so I guess people climb palm trees. But I found myself just in looking at this one image, there were some things that made me curious. I wanted to know more about the pyramid. I wanted to know more about the stereograph, the actual image itself. And I found myself wondering a little bit, on the side of this image, we have some information about the company that made the image. And what caught my eye, and I've seen, hundreds, if not thousands of these things on the library's website, but I never looked super closely. And it says New York, London, Toronto, Canada, and Ottawa, Kansas. And I've been to Ottawa, Kansas, and Ottawa, Kansas is not a lot like New York, London, or Toronto. So again, I found myself curious, but that curiosity wasn't really feeding what I was hoping to say as part of tonight's talk. So I moved on. I moved on to this image. And again, it fit my image, of an oasis. It had the palm trees. It had it had water. It had a couple of people. It had some camels. I had to look closely to see these people. But I found myself thinking about the format of the object and wondered a little bit about, what happened? What happened to this image that would cause this damage? And again, I found myself thinking, gee, I wonder if we know the answer to that, or if it's one of those answers that's sort of, just lost to history. But I kept looking at the images thinking, surely I'm going to find something that just says, this is the thing you want to talk about, Leanne. And I found this one. And this one caught my eye for a lot of reasons, because, well, first of all, it looked a lot like this image. And I was like, that's weird. I wonder what's going on there. I wonder if it's the same image. I wonder if it was taken at the same time. So I looked more closely at the bibliographic record, and sure enough, found that this object and the other one that I was looking at were both in a collection in the library from this Matson photo service. So again, I went digging to find out more about the Matson photo service, because I was curious, that this image is clearly a colorized version of whatever this series of images was. And I wanted to know a little bit more about, that colorization. And I learned that this Madsen photograph collection contains 22,000 photographs and glass negatives, primarily of the Middle East during the period 1898 to 1946. And I thought, wow, okay, here's another collection I didn't know much about. Maybe I ought to go back to that one. But as what usually happens, I'm scrolling through images, and of course I stumble on the next one. Oh, and the other thing that was interesting about this one was the caption. And I should mention this, that contained in this caption was also a biblical reference. And, I don't see a lot of biblical references in captions on library collections. And so I looked this one up to see what the reference was. And of course, the reference is the, Jews being led out of Egypt. And that this location is apparently a location that is believed to have been referred to. So I thought that was pretty neat. But then, like I said, I got distracted by this image. And what was interesting about this image is I looked at it and I was like, oh, that kind of looks like those rocks near my folks' house. And my folks live in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And so again, initially, I was drawn to the image because it looked familiar. And then when I read the caption and it read, an oasis, 6 Navajo on horseback, water in foreground, circa 1904. I was like, well, you know what? That could be in New Mexico, given that it's Navajo. But then as I look at the bibliographic record, I find the name Edward Curtis. Again, totally drawn to information in the bibliographic record because I know a little bit, I know enough to be dangerous, I guess, about the Edward Curtis collection. And Edward Curtis is one of those individuals who, when we think about the passage of time and we think about what we know and what we don't know about the American West, Edward Curtis took more than 40,000 photographs of the American West, primarily of Native Americans, and many of his images are in the library's collection. The item that's here is part of, I want to say, a collection of like 2,000 images that are available on the library's website. And again, this one was taken in 1904, and the majority of his images are taken right around that same, early in the early 1900s. I want to pause just for a second and just kind of throw it out there. Have any of you ever explored the Curtis collection? And Kyle, I'm going to click on the link here just to see if this works, if I can go directly to it without upsetting everything. Are you guys seeing the collection page?
No, we're just seeing the.
Yeah, I figured. Well, it's okay, but I'm sending you a link to the. I tell you what, if I try to go back, can I go back? I should be able to. After my talk, I'll send you the PowerPoint as a PDF with all of the links active, so you guys can do some exploring there. And good. So Michelle, I'm glad to hear that you know about this collection. Yes, primarily the tribes in New Mexico, and yeah, thousands of images. But anyway, I encourage you to explore them. But that notion of an oasis, what caught my eye about it was most of the images that I was finding were in the Middle East and North Africa. And then I started moving into the American Southwest. And then, of course, images started to change again. And it's interesting how the images that start coming up when we get later into the 20th century start looking like this. Are you guys seeing this one? The Oasis DriveIn in El Reno, Oklahoma. All right. The again, caught my eye, thinking about, okay, it's 5-cent burgers at the Oasis Drive-In. And then right below it was the Oasis Bar on Main Street in Pocatello, Idaho, followed by the billboard in Oakama, South Dakota, advertising Al's Oasis, where, yep, coffee is still 5 cents. And I started thinking back to what I had imagined originally about what an oasis provides, and wondered, why is it that somewhere in the middle of the 1900s, a lot of seemingly roadside attraction type places started adopting the term oasis. Again, curious, and then found the Oasis Bar in Billings, Montana. Are any of you familiar with any of these places, by the way? I'm just curious. I do know that there is there used to be, years ago when my husband and I lived in Houston, there was an Oasis restaurant on Clear Lake where we could go and get shrimp po' boys that were pretty terrific. That's the only Oasis that I'm really familiar with. And then I changed gears. So I went from looking at the photographs of oases in the library's collections and found myself exploring historic newspapers, and found this one that is in fact called The Oasis from Arizona, Arizona. And this is the first edition of the Oasis newspaper of Arizona, Arizona, from May 11th of 1893. And just in case you're not familiar with where Arizona is located, Arizona is located halfway between Tucson and Phoenix, and chances are good it's a place where in 1893 it would have been nice to find an oasis. And in addition to this newspaper, there was this one, the Daily Morning Oasis in Nogales, Arizona. That, again, this is its first edition, December 1st, 1917. And Nogales is located basically on the border with Mexico. The one before it, by the way, this one, this is, long before Arizona is a state. This one, again, from Nogales. Then I continued exploring some more. And by the way, there are all kinds of things, in these newspapers that make good mention of Oasis and describe the community. But then I stumbled on this one, and I had to send this one to a couple of colleagues in the office. It's a movie, it's a commercial. It's a commercial that was made for a movie theater, so this is early. This is 1935, when most people did not yet have television sets, but they did go to the movies. And this commercial from the Frigidaire refrigerator company is advertising a refrigerator and describing it as though it is an oasis. And I'll read you a little bit of the description. It says, the film or the commercial discusses the hardships felt during the July 1934 heat wave in the Rio Grande region. American Indian dancers are shown performing in ceremonies or rituals meant to change the weather. The Frigidaire refrigerator and its super freezer are presented as a way to better preserve food and save families during the harsh weather. And I gotta say, there are parts of this film that are endearing, and there are parts of it that are really disturbing. And I say that because, today, it's one of those films where if you shared it with students, you would have to preface it and say, there are things about this film that are, frankly, politically incorrect. There are things about it that we just wouldn't do today. And it's definitely a reflection of America in the 30s. But it's also interesting that a refrigerator company is describing its product with this expression of an oasis, sort of using the same description we used earlier, providing everything that we need. Let's see, I'm scanning this. Yeah, I think they do, Kent. Your question about, don't they still call rest stops near Chicago oases? I think you're right. And didn't there used to be a rest stop in the Chicago area that was like over the highway? Like, you could park, and then the rest stop itself was like, on an overpass or something. I think that was definitely called an oasis. That's a cool memory, by the way. All right, I'm going to keep going because I've got so many more things I want to show you and get to a by the way, I'm getting to a really good point. It's just taking me a while to get there because that's what happens when you explore the library's collections. So then I thought, okay, the photographs are good, the film footage is okay, the newspapers are interesting, maybe maps are where I'm really going to get at my discovery of an oasis. So I went to my, actually I went to my phone, and if you all have your phones handy, you too could do this. And you go to Google Maps and you just type in Oasis and you see what the closest thing to you is. And when I did it, I was actually on my way to visit my kids last weekend in North Carolina and in Southern Virginia. And wherever I was when I did that initial search, I was near an Oasis nail spa and I was near an Oasis bar. So I thought that was kind of interesting. But I also identified a number of states. I looked at my weather app. That's what I did. I looked at the weather app and I did a search on Oasis, and I started finding more locations of towns called Oasis across the country that I never knew existed. One of them was in Iowa. So I went looking through our Iowa maps. And if you have never seen this Galbraith's Railway Mail Service map, and there's actually 8 of them, Iowa is just one of them, they're incredible. They're absolutely amazing maps that have in just about every community or near every community some sort of drawing that gives you some insight into the community's history or in something about its literary heritage or its political leanings. Absolutely amazing. And anyway, so this is okay. I'm going to scan the chat because I'm getting some good feedback here. Yes, it's true. If you open a fridge, it does feel like an oasis if you're in New Mexico and Arizona in July. It's true. Okay, Mary, I'm sorry. The Oasis Brewing Company, good, good. Oasis Pizza, I agree with this one. Okay. Emily, you've got to be in Colorado because if we found one of those near my house in Maryland, there would be a lot of talk going on. That would be the Oasis Cannabis Superstore. Too funny, absolutely too funny. These are great. Yes, and the Oasis rest stop definitely had a McDonald's. Very cool. Okay, so back to the Iowa map. So here is Oasis, Iowa, which is right north of West Branch, Iowa. And extra points if you know what presidential library is in West Branch, Iowa. Anyone? Anyone? Herbert Hoover, Mary Johnson, woohoo! Yes. Sarah, this is great. So Sarah Westbrook has found an Oasis Brazilian steakhouse. That is fabulous. Oh, this is good. Very, very good. Okay. Fabulous map of Iowa. So there's an Oasis, Iowa, but there is also, in case you were wondering, there's an Oasis, Utah. And Oasis, Utah is located right about here on the big map, but here it is on the littler map. And it probably is, in fact, an oasis. And it's one of those communities where it would be fun to know when it was first settled, which is exactly what I was thinking about when I came across Oasis, Nevada. I found this map from 1866 in the library's collection, and it didn't say Oasis on it. And I found Oasis, using my Google map. And I used the Google map to help me figure out where I think Oasis might have been located. And you can see on the Google map, here's Humboldt Pass. And you guys, half of you know how much I love Alexander von Humboldt stories. So here's another, landform named for Humboldt. But here's the Humboldt Pass. And here it is, on the Google map. Here it is on the 1866 map. And here is Pilot Peak. And here's Pilot Peak on this map. So I'm thinking that Oasis, which today is nowhere near any water, is probably located right around here where there were once a couple of streams coming together that are no longer there, in at least not on the present day maps. But anyway, what caught my eye about this is probably what's catching a couple of your eyes is this emigrant road, and thinking that maybe in fact folks coming across the mountains and making their way across Nevada and into California may well have spent time at Oasis, Nevada. And when I searched on You can find out what does the last census tell you about a community. Oasis, Nevada had 34 people living there. All right, the next thing I came across, I had found on my phone that there is, in my weather app, that there is a Oasis New Mexico. And I went looking through all of the library's maps, and I mean, I used the Google Maps, so I knew where it was located, and it's sort of north of Mesilla and north of Las Cruces and south of Albuquerque quite a ways, near Hatch, near where the green chilies are from. And I went looking in the old maps to see if I could find it, and I couldn't find it at all, but I did see that it's located today near Caballo Dam. So I searched on the library's website to see if I could find anything on Caballo Dam. And it led me into congress.gov, which, again, one of those resources on the library's website that when I'm looking for cool primary sources that really speak to me, congress.gov doesn't always come to the top. However, in this case, I thought this was pretty neat because it led me to relatively recent conversations about oases. And I hadn't thought to do a search in congress.gov on the word oasis until I stumbled on this one. So I did, and I ended up with lots of pieces of legislation that mention the word oasis. For example, a piece of legislation that was introduced in the 111th Congress that was entitled the Food Desert Oasis Act of 2009. And then I found the Interstate Oasis Act of 1999, and needless to say, the list kept going. So I found oases in pieces of legislation that I hadn't anticipated. And at this point in my research, and by the way, you guys have all been here, I know you have, where you kind of start going down one little rabbit hole and you think, oh, this is going to be easy. I'm going to find something that's going to be exactly what, and then you get so distracted that you get to this point. I had hit one of those Library of Congress collections overload moments and was in fact searching for an oasis of my own. And thanks to Carol Highsmith's collection back in the photograph collections, I found this fabulous mural on a wall in Socorro, New Mexico, that she photographed in 2021. But what I needed to do was regroup. I needed to rethink about, okay, what am I really trying to say? What is it? They've been so gracious in asking me to extend a keynote address. I really want to say something worth saying and not just lead you on a wild goose chase, which I gotta say, I love that. I love that somebody's picked up on the goose chase idea. So I backtracked. And this time, I backtracked to terminology. And I do that a lot. I focused my attention back on the term oasis. And instead of using Merriam-Webster, this time I used an Oxford reference and was reminded that the word oasis is derived from Egyptian. It was actually the Greek word for watered, habitable land in deserts, particularly in North Africa. I was reminded that those oases of Egypt were important trading stations. They were linked to the Nile River Valley and to each other by caravan, and that the oases of the Sahara were first described by Herodotus as a chain extending east to west at 10-day intervals. And a little bit of a light bulb went off in my head because as a historian, Herodotus is one of those individuals that you just know. He's referred to as the father of history, and he's a name that I bet we've got some good Herodotus stuff in the library's collection. So of course, now I'm on another wild goose chase of sorts, but I find a Herodotus volume in the library's collections, and it's in the original Greek. And when I looked closely at the bibliographic record of this Herodotus volume, I'm going to throw it out there to you guys in the chat. Whose book do you think this is? Original Greek, Herodotus. Anyone? Anyone? Yes. Sherry, you're spot on. Yes, this is Thomas Jefferson's copy of Herodotus. And of course, it's 7 volumes, by the way. This is volume number 3, where he actually talks about the oases of the Sahara. But I think this was a first for me, where I was searching something, and when I started scanning the bibliographic record, I found myself sort of taken aback that, oh, the book that I'm looking at, oh yeah, it's one of Thomas Jefferson's books. And in volume 3 of Thomas Jefferson's Herodotus is where the description of oases are. And the description that's in there is the description of an oasis that we all have in our heads. I think that's pretty interesting, isn't it? Isn't that cool, Kyle? Yeah, me too. I thought that was neat. I didn't know it either, that it was labeled as the former owner of these books. But now I want to know more, right, about Thomas Jefferson and his affinity for Herodotus, if he had an affinity for Herodotus. So I wanted to go looking in the Jefferson papers to see if Thomas Jefferson ever said anything specific about Herodotus. And fortunately, the library holds Thomas Jefferson's papers, but unfortunately, the finding aid is a little challenging. And of course, the manuscripts are tough. And if you're looking for Herodotus, it's like looking for a needle in a haystack. And whenever I'm looking at collections that I know edited editions exist, I am very grateful for organizations like the University of Virginia and the archives that created the Founders Online site a number of years ago. And I'm hoping that many of you already know about this site. And if you don't, that I'm giving you one of those fabulous like epiphany moments right now. The Founders Online website, as I mentioned, it's administered by the archives through the National Historical Publications and Records Commission. That's the granting arm of the archives. That's the group that for years and years helped support editorial projects. And in this case, it's NHPRC working with the University of Virginia Press to take all of those edited volumes and make them searchable, and not just searchable by themselves, but cross-searchable. So in this case, I selected the Thomas Jefferson papers, and I selected the term Herodotus and just did a search to see, so did Thomas Jefferson ever say anything in writing about Herodotus? And found that, yeah, he did. In fact, he did at least 20 times. And here are the lists, here's the list of those 20 times when it's mentioned. And so I found myself looking at these names like, do I know who these people are? I wonder what this one is. I wonder, and then I'm looking at the dates and I'm thinking, oh yeah, Jefferson was in Paris then. That's interesting. He's back home here. I wonder who this one is. And anyway, I went digging. And this one right here is the one that caught my eye. From Thomas Jefferson to Peter Carr, August 19th, 1785. And in that letter, this is the letter. So if I click on that, this is the page I get. And in this letter that Jefferson writes, and by the way, Peter Carr, at this point on August 19th, 1785, Peter is Thomas Jefferson's nephew, and he's 15 years old, and he has just started school at the College of William and Mary. And Jefferson writes to him basically to say, it's great that you're at school. It's really important that you hit the books hard. And there are a lot of things you need to know and a lot of things you need to learn. And I'm going to give you some advice. And I'm going to tell you what books I think you ought to invest in. And in fact, I'm going to send some of the books to you. And there are reasons for this. And so it's a 5-page letter. It's a 5-page handwritten letter that Jefferson writes to Peter Carr. And it's in this letter that he makes specific mention of Herodotus. By the way, this is what the letter looks like in the Jefferson papers on the library's website. And by the way, you can get there so easily. Like if you go from here and you literally cut and paste Thomas Jefferson to Peter Carr, 19 August 1785, and then you paste it into the library search, you'll come right to it. So it makes it nice and easy. So in this letter, what he says, again, this is sort of midway through the first part of the letter. Jefferson says to Peter, an honest heart being the first blessing, a knowing head is the second. For the present, I advise you to begin a course of ancient history, reading everything in the original and not in translations. First, read Goldsmith's History of Greece. This will give you a digested view of this field. Then take up ancient history in detail, reading the following books in the following order: Herodotus, Thucydides, and so on. This shall form the first stage of your historical reading and is all I need to mention to you now. But then he goes on and he tells him what he ought to be reading in terms of mathematics and in terms of natural philosophy. And then he starts giving Peter some more advice. And he says, in order to assure a certain progress in this reading, consider what hours you have free from school and the exercises of the school. Give about 2 of them every day to exercise, for health must not be sacrificed to learning. A strong body makes the mind strong. The object of walking is to relax the mind. You should therefore not permit yourself to even think while you walk, but divert your attention by the objects surrounding you. Walking is the best possible exercise. Habituate yourself to walk very far. Who knew that Jefferson gave advice on walking? And then he says, hey, I've ordered the following books to be sent to you from London to the care of Mr. Madison. Herodotus was one of them. Again, I found myself kind of excited about, well, gosh, he really did talk about Herodotus. And then later there's a letter to Francis, and Francis was his grandson. And it's a very similar type of letter a few years later, trying to give advice and saying, you know, you really had to read Herodotus. This is sort of the beginning of our understanding of history. And, you know, the more you learn about Herodotus and what he was known for, not just being the father of history, but Herodotus is known as the first historian who combined curiosity about the past with rational inquiry. He was the first Greek writer who succeeded in writing a large-scale historical narrative that has survived the passage of time. So when we talk about Herodotus being sort of like, this is where the way we do history, where it's curiosity that drives inquiry, that's Herodotus. So at this point, I'm feeling really good about him, but I'm still not quite there in the brilliant thing that I want to say about him. And then I think back to what I wanted to say. And I'm thinking, okay, if a learning oasis is a place or an experience where curiosity is fed, where intellect is stimulated, where you feel connected to ideas and to others. And, you know, when I was asked for a title for this talk, before I'd actually even created it, I had suggested to Kyle, why don't we call it Discover, a primary source oasis with the Library of Congress collections. And then I go back to search Herodotus, and this time, instead of having it be everything, including Jefferson's, you know, copy, I narrowed my search to just prints and photographs, just to see maybe there's like a bust of this guy, or maybe there's something else that can speak to me. And look who I find. There he is. And look at what he's got with him. He's got a walking stick. He's got, you know, a scroll, which is what he's writing. And this is the coolest thing. He's got a hat on his back because he's walking. And look what he's overlooking. He's overlooking. Go ahead, everybody say it in unison in the chat. Yes, he's overlooking the main reading room of the Library of Congress in the Jefferson building. And that's what I wanted to kind of my big reveal is the main reading room of the Library of Congress. Talk about a learning oasis. Talk about a place where curiosity, and you know, Mary, it's so funny that your comment about the hat, it made me think about that section of that letter that Jefferson wrote to his nephew about walking. And I'm just trying to imagine, gee, I wonder if Thomas Jefferson had a hat like Herodotus's hat. I wonder if Herodotus really had a hat, or is that just sort of a sculptor's prerogative to put a hat on him? But it's one of the, I've never seen the back of this statue. You know, when you're in the reading room, you don't see the backs of the statues. It never would have occurred to me that he'd have had, a hat on his back. But with that, I am hoping that during the course of this week, with the all of the sessions that you've been attending, that your curiosity has been fed, that your intellect has been stimulated, and that you have felt connected to ideas and to others. And I was just hoping to sort of open it up and have a conversation and respond to any questions you have about the library, about collections, and about search strategies, because that's where the real fun is in these exchanges. So Kyle, I don't know if you can open it up for folks to just chat, or if we can just open up the chat, but I'm happy to just respond.
Yeah, folks should be able to unmute as well as turn on the video if you would like.
All right, Jenny's got a question. I've searched the digital collections for Mesa Verde, but there's not a gathered collection. There are many sources for Mesa Verde, but no digital collection. Well, it depends. It's one of these things. Carol Highsmith, if you're looking just photographs, Carol Highsmith is a present day photographer who has been incredibly generous to the library and to the American people by donating her photographs to the library and to the American people. So her photographs are all rights free, which makes it a really fabulous, contemporary collection. I know that she has been doing her photographing of the country sort of state by state. And I don't know whether she has completed Colorado or not. If not, then I would say chances are good there will be collections of photographs on their way at some point. But other things related to Mesa Verde, and again, this is one of these, sort of depends on what you're looking for. The Historic American Buildings Survey, it's not just the built environment, in modern days, but they do have materials related to the built environment that go back centuries. So there may be materials in that collection that are separate. Collections at the library are usually not done by location. They're usually by the individual that collected them. So as far as, unless there's someone out there collecting materials specific to Mesa Verde, that's probably a little bit of a stretch. Okay, another question. How can I find resources of non-marginalized allies in the civil rights movement in the collection? Oh, Michelle, that's such a good question. Have you explored the oral histories in the Civil Rights History project that the library did with the African American Museum of the Smithsonian?
A little bit. We haven't totally. This actually got posted on Goose Chase by one of our participants. So I'm just bringing it forward because I know you have these magic pockets in the brain that know about this. And I wanted to see what you could share because this is of interest to many of our participants right now.
Yes, well, I would say that those oral histories are a really good place. There are, oral histories of individuals who participated in the civil rights movement from a wide variety of vantage points. So that might be a good collection. The other thing that's really nice about that collection is that all of the oral histories have been transcribed so that when you're in the collection and you're searching in the collection, you are doing a complete search of the transcriptions. So say you're in there and you want to find out what was somebody saying. I want to know what was said about Selma. You can just search Selma in that collection and find every instance when somebody mentioned Selma.
Thank you so much.
You bet. And Mary Johnson, look at you. You found the Carol Highsmith photographs of Mesa Verde. Awesome. Perfect. Very cool. Other questions or other observations or other things that folks want to I've stunned you all into silence. Okay, as Peggy says, as you've searched the library collections over the years, what primary source jumped out that I remember? Oh my.
Another one, Leanne, as you've gone all through the library over all these years, there's one you must be a aha or oh my god.
Honestly, I think I've told you this one. This was not that long ago. I was doing I was writing an article for social ed, for the NCSS journal. And they were doing an issue and they were asking if we could do something that might be of interest to economics teachers. We don't tend to focus so much on economic related materials. And so I was stretching a little bit and I went looking for receipts in the collections. And in some cases you can be in a collection, search receipt. And again, depending on the bibliographic records that exist and depending on the finding aids, you can, or anyway, what I found was actually in the Rosa Parks papers. And it was one of her receipts for having paid a poll tax. And it was one of those things where you look at it and you're like, I know what this is, and I can't believe this is what this is. And she was paying $1.50 in 1956. It was her poll tax so that she could vote. And it's one of those things where if I were still in the classroom and I were teaching about, amendments, I was teaching about the civil rights movement, I was teaching about voting rights, that is absolutely a document that I would be sharing. That was one that again, I'm looking for a receipt. I didn't know what I'd find. And that one did make me pause, definitely.
I can see that.
Yeah, that's a good question, Peggy. Anything else, anybody?
Now's your time to ask the person who knows the Library of Congress back and forth. This is your moment.
It's all good. It's all good.
Oh, there it is.
Oh, okay, here we go. This is a goose chase, but I love that. I got to talk to the people who came up with that. Primary sources for Transcontinental Railroad want to bring in multiple perspectives. Chinese workers, Irish workers, Native Americans, white settlers living on the land where railroad will be built, possibly. Big Four would love variety of primary sources. Yes. Okay. So, this is one of these things where if I were really starting my search, I would probably I would go to Chronicling America. I would poke around historic newspapers just to see what might exist. And I would remind myself that the Transcontinental Railroad was not just at Promontory Point in Utah. I think every photograph that appears in a textbook about the Transcontinental Railroad kind of gives you the impression that it's where the Golden Spike was, which you sort of forget about along the way. So I would look at Chronicling America and newspapers from, multiple states and multiple communities to see what I could find. I would probably also, this is one of these, depending on what I would find in different communities, again, this is a good question. Maybe, I don't know. I wish I could remember, in our manuscripts division, there are lots of, papers of individuals, journals, and so on. I can't think of anything immediately, but that doesn't mean they don't exist. So I would probably send a note to a colleague in the manuscripts division, and I would say, hey, what might we have that could be related? Yeah, it's a good one. It's good. I'm going to throw it out there to some of you guys. So Mary, Sherry, have you guys stumbled on anything specific to the building of the Transcontinental Railroad?
It's a challenge that I'm ready to start digging.
Yeah, I'm feeling the same way. Now I'm curious. This is good. Okay, next one. Kent, with the avalanche of online media, including social media and podcasts, asks, how has the library made decisions about what to collect and organize? Great question. It depends. As with any collection, the library has certain guidelines and certain, it's part of a larger whole. There are podcasts being saved by the library right now. In fact, the American Folklife Center, which is part of the library, they are not only saving podcasts, but they're also producing some podcasts. They are taking materials that are in the American Folklife Center's collection and are turning them into, they're using them as clips embedded within podcasts. They've been doing ones recently related to labor, and I think again, if you visit the library's website and you check out the American Folklife Center, that's where you're going to find not only the existing ones that are being collected, but also ones being produced. Okay, I'm scrolling some more. Oh, good, great, Mary, thank you. The person who asked the question about the Transcontinental Railroad, there is a new LibGuide, a new research guide on the railroad that has a link on the left to items specific to the Transcontinental Railroad. Okay, another question. You, of course, do a lot of research on the library and elsewhere. Loved when you mentioned you've gone too far and needed to realign and reset. What ideas do you have for teachers or students who might get overwhelmed? Oh yeah, that getting overwhelmed is such a common experience. And like I said, in my own research, I do have to stop and reset and try to realign and come up with what is it that I'm trying to get at. And usually, what happens to me is what happened in this case, where I wanted to say something about a learning oasis, and I didn't necessarily expect to find what I found, and I was allowing myself to be wide open. But again, deadlines are always good because at some point you got to stop doing the searching and you got to get to something. So honestly, I do think that pacing yourself with time is one strategy. I also think, starting in the beginning with sort of allowing yourself a certain amount of time to just explore, because often, you may not find what you're looking for if you're looking for something specific. And it's sort of healthy to allow yourself to just sort of find what you find. But for me, I do often go back to sort of a term or a specific definition that I'm looking for. I did some of my research too. I was looking at the words you guys used in planning this week, and you used great words about, reimagining and recreating. And I found myself, that Merriam-Webster tool that allows you to find out when the first use of a word was. And I was thinking, maybe there's something there. Maybe there's, a connection, were all of those words sort of coming into use in roughly the same decade? And that wasn't the case. So, you have to allow yourself time to just sort of explore too, I think. Good question. What has surprised you the most about the expanded mission of educational outreach? I think it's great in terms of, I think very little surprises me. I think the more that the library digitizes collections and makes them available, there is a greater awareness of how incredibly valuable and useful these materials are to everybody. And I think the more we can get the word out that the library's collections belong to the American people and we should all be using them, the better. I think I think there absolutely is magic in those connections. I think that when, for those of you who were involved in the conversation this morning, the Morning Mojo conversation, when Sherry mentioned a map that she had stumbled on, and then Cynthia shared that the map was actually of a river near a community where she had lived in Colombia in the 70s. And it seems so random, but it's not. Those connections are so important. And I think that the more we dig into the collections and we find those things and we share them with one another, the better the world is. Okay, could anyone with a collection of photos, letters, or other, yes, they could, in fact, but that doesn't mean the library would necessarily take them. You could offer them. And there are certainly opportunities for materials to be donated and opportunities to just describe what it is that you have and that you are interested in donating. And what the library does is looks for holes in the collection, looks for missing voices and missing experiences and missing kinds of media, and certainly welcomes those donations. If the materials are similar to existing materials or honestly replicas of existing materials, what the library will likely do is encourage the individual that's interested in donating them to donate them to another repository, to a state library, to a university library, to a local historical society, or whatever, wherever the likelihood of the materials getting the most use or having the most value to the organization is probably what they'll suggest. But yeah, the library accessions materials all the time. It's pretty cool when you learn about, this summer, the library acquired an amazing collection of cipher books, which I know sounds really exciting, but it is. These are, before there were math books that kids could, write in, they would learn math, and they would have their own books that they would transfer. They would do their problems on a slate, and when they figured out exactly how to do it, they would transfer their answers to their cipher book. And the cipher book collection that the library acquired this summer, these are materials from kids for the most part, that date back to the 1700s and into the middle of the 1800s, and mostly from communities across New England and the upper Midwest. And again, just an amazing, cool collection that absolutely fills a hole. We don't have a lot of student work in the library's collections, so that was a pretty cool hole to fill. A couple of professors, by the way, at a university in Illinois were collecting those materials. So, any other questions? Anything folks are curious about? It's Thursday night. It's dinner time. I get it. It's all good.
Thank you so much.
Oh, you're so welcome.
Oh, it is always such a pleasure to have you. We've had Leanne at TLD in the past, and she's been able to come to Colorado, and we hope to repeat that soon. Have Leanne back. Her sessions are always wonderful. So thank you so much.
Yes, you are very welcome. Thanks for having me, and happy hunting.
Yes. So before we end, please rate this session. Your feedback is really important to us, and we learn from it. So please click the rate session button to fill out a survey. And again, we'll send out contact hour forms and a survey at the end of the week. And then there is the book pack giveaway. And Kyle, you're going to have to help me with this one. Who chooses this? Is it?
So I'll leave it up to Crystal. She's the one.
Okay, Crystal is the chooser. All right, Crystal, who is the winner of the book pack giveaway?
The backpack. The winner of the book pack is going to be Rebecca. Sorry if I'm saying this wrong, but Nemec. She will be the winner. I will send her an email getting information from her that I will need.
Well, congratulations, Rebecca. And I think that that wraps it up for tonight. So good night. Thank you so much for attending. And be sure at 7:30 tomorrow morning Mountain Time, you attend our Morning Mojo. Sherry and Cindy are great at recapping the day and making sure that they point you to the really good resources. So with that, good night and thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody.